Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. On this Sunday, which is called the Sunday before Theophany, not only do we hear certain prayers and incidences about the coming baptism of the Lord, the Theophany of the Lord, but we also commemorate some very important saints, two of whom I will mention today to you, and some of the interesting things that we know about them. The first one, Saint Sylvester, Pope of Rome. Saint Sylvester was the Pope during the time when Constantine the Great moved the capital of Christianity from Rome to Constantinople and started the great Byzantine Empire, which lasted for over 1,000 years and preserved in truth the whole spirit of original Christianity, not polluted by the logical worldly thinking that Rome eventually fell into and actually left the original church, leaving behind the 4 other jurisdictions which to this day remain as part of the church, namely Jerusalem, Constantinople, Alexandria, and Antioch. The interesting about Saint Sylvester is that in Rome, there is in one of the churches there, his relics, his skull. And what I'm about to tell you, I'm going to not reveal all the names in order to not cause scandal with some of the ones involved. In the 1980s, myself and my wife were travelling through Europe in the holy places on a pilgrimage, and we found ourselves in Rome and joined up with a well-known monk in Australia, including the future Metropolitan Arion. At that stage he was a priest, and together with this we journeyed through the holy places of Rome that were left to us before Rome went into schism and into heresy. We knew that St. Sylvester's relics were in this particular church, and we went there. It was around about just after midday. It was a time when the Latins have their siesta, or their break for the day. We knocked on the door, and a man opened. It was around the side of the church, it wasn't in the front. And we explained to him that we'd like to come and venerate the relics of the saints that you have in your reliquary. This particular person got rather irritated, mainly because we had barged in on the time when he wanted to go and have his midday meal or siesta or whatever it was. And he shuffled around and thought a bit, looked at us and saw that there was 2 priests here and a couple of pilgrims. And he said, look, I'll let you in. I'll put the lock on. So when you leave, just slam the door shut so that nobody else can come in. So we went in. And they had a whole wall with shelves full of different relics of the saints. And among them, under a glass dome, was the skull of Saint Sylvester, the Pope of Rome. This was from the 4th century. Saint Sylvester died in 335 AD, 335 years after Christ. Looking at this particular skull carefully, one of the priests that was with us from Australia had an idea, and he took the dome off the skull and put his hand inside the skull where the very small bones of the skull exist. And everybody was looking at him in a bit of terror. In any case, he broke a little bit of that bone off. It was tissue thin, you know, some of the bones inside the head are like that. He wrapped it in a cloth, and later on, very soon later on, actually put it into wax in the normal way that relics are kept in the church. And of course brought it back to Australia. This is how the relics of St. Sylvester, the Pope of Rome, during the time of St. Constantine the Great, came to Australia. This was not really a terrible thing to do, because at that time Rome was actually purging itself of many of the relics, giving them away, throwing them out and doing all sorts of things. And in fact, in this church where we had all these relics on the shelf, it didn't look like they were cared for at all, and certainly they weren't in a state where people could come and venerate them. And I know that many other priests in Australia were gifted different relics from Rome, which was sort of throwing them out. This was of course part of their Vatican II idea that all these sort of things are not necessary for one's salvation. Anyway, that's the story of how the relics of St. Sylvester, Pope of Rome, from the 4th century came to Australia. The other great saint we commemorate today is the second finding of the relics of St. Seraphim, wonder worker of Sarov. Now, if you know anything about the geography of Russia, Sarov is a town, a city actually, probably about 3 to 4 hours drive from Moscow, and it was a restricted town for many decades under the Soviet regime, because it was there that they developed the atomic bomb, the Soviet atomic bomb. They took over the monastery of Sarov that St. Seraphim had founded and used that as the basis for the various scientists and the technicians that were working there during that period as their base. Luckily, they did not destroy it like they destroyed some of the other churches. Well, or nearly all of them they destroyed. But this one they preserved quite well. However, they made one of the workers make a special mix with lime and glue and to paint over the frescoes. You know, there's huge frescoes in that whole church, on the walls and on the ceiling and elsewhere, to cover them up so that the people that were working there would not view these holy icons. This particular worker, a lady, something actually pricked in her heart. She made the lime mix, but she did not add the glue. And the glue is a very important thing that makes the whole thing stick. And she whitewashed these frescoes and left them at that. Said nothing to anybody at all. When time passed and the USSR was shaken up and Christianity was again allowed, it was very easy then to remove this whitewash and go back to the original frescoes that were there, which were left pretty much in pristine form because no glue was used and therefore they did not damage anything. Now this lady acted in some sort of materic way, because had they found out about this, her life would have been in great danger, because she was given this duty actually to cover these things up. But she did, but only in such a way that they could be restored very easily after that. I am not sure whether Sarov is open to pilgrims still, because there is a lot of things happening there. Saint Seraphim would often appear during the Soviet period when this atomic bombs were being developed, and would prevent certain things from happening or allow certain other things to happen. I am sure that it was through his activities and his prayers that the USSR never used the bomb on other people like the USA did. And it's still, to this day in Russia, does not wish to be one that would use the atomic bomb upon other people, because it's certainly a destructive thing that can usher in very much the end of the world. So in our situation, particularly now where we have these activities going on in Eastern Europe, we need to intercede, us, Saint Seraphim, intercede that all those terrible and horrible things that are happening there may be put to rest, because it's virtually like a civil war where Slavs are killing Slavs. The Ukraine has always been part of Russia. It's the root from which the whole Slavic nation and Orthodox Christianity in the East arose, through the work of St. Andrew, the first called apostle, who came there and planted a staff and prophesied that this would be a great place for Christianity in the future. And so it was. And Kiev was the place where the first great blossoming of Orthodox Christianity began back over 1,000 years ago. This is the sort of feast day that we celebrate today on this Sunday. The FOREFEAST of Theophany, the feast of Saint Sylvester and of Saint Seraphim of Sarov. And I ask you to think about this and read up in more detail the life of Saint Seraphim, especially because he has many prophecies and many important works that are relevant to us today. Some of these prophecies have not yet come true. And also the life of Saint Sylvester, because at that time there was great commotion, as you know, in the 4th century. Rome was killing Christians right, left and centre, throwing them to lions and all sorts of things. And St. Constantine the Great put an end to this. He moved the capital of Constantinople and issued an edict, the Edict of Milan, that no longer are Christians to be persecuted, but to be accepted as equals and to be accepted as free people, able to go on and practice their holy faith. Glory be to thee, O Lord, for all things, and may his name be glorified forever and ever. Amen.